Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
And I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today, we're going to be interviewing George Kramer, an author and mutual friend who has about a dozen works, many of which are part of his Arcadis series. We originally interviewed George back in 2016 at a book fair. However, the footage was inadvertently shelved and never saw the light of day. That being said, this interview will recap the original and catches us up with what George has been doing and what he has in the works right now.
Good to see you, George. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
All right. So, my son has read the first couple of the Arcadis series. He really likes it. For those that don't know, why don't you tell the audience a bit about that series?
Okay, I just published the ninth one a couple of days ago.
Okay.
It's either going to be the final one or the 10th be the final one. I just love writing the series. And my daughter goes to me, how many books are you going to write of these fantasy series? I was like, Perry Mason, the author, wrote 80, but I'll stop at 9. Because in each book, I put a cliffhanger where the next book starts where the other book stopped. I did not do that in ninth book. I put an ending, but I always create insertion points in my books, whereas I can take that point and expound on it into a different book.
Gotcha. So, I know they're kind of a YA fantasy series. Can you talk a little bit more about the world and what it's about?
Sure. Arcadius is the most powerful sorcerer in the 16 known realms, and he just wants to be left alone. He owns an antique store in McCordsville, where I live, but he's harboring a massive secret. Like I said, he's the strongest sorcerer. But lately, more and more sorcerers want to fight him on his property, and it's because of a prophecy, which is several hundred years old. Basically, there's 3 primary colors in the real world: red, blue, and yellow. In the fantasy world, I have Arcadius is a red-powered sorcerer, and in the beginning of the sorcerer world, you had to marry your own color. So a yellow-powered sorcerer had to marry yellow, red had to marry red, blue had to marry blue. When Lord Quill took over, he didn't want anybody to usurp his authority, so he mandated you could not marry your own color. He left a few bloodlines alone to keep the race still going, but basically, now when a red-powered sorcerer marries a blue-powered sorcerer, a purple-powered baby is born. When a red marries a yellow and orange, and when a yellow marries a blue, a green-powered baby is born, and they're considered secondaries. They're not as powerful, and throughout the whole book, they felt like they're not being treated fairly, so a war erupts in book 2. But let me tell you guys, I have Arcadius from a humble beginning to book 9, where he's fighting gods. I just love the series.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like there's an analogy to kind of class warfare, racial tension, that sort of stuff. Is that would that be too far reaching to say that's what you were kind of the messaging you were going for with the color coding and stuff?
Correct. In 2014, when I did the first one, there was nothing that was going on politically now. But I always respected everybody, treat everybody fairly, and that's what I wanted to represent in my books. Doesn't matter who you are.
Gotcha.
Oh, and since the last time we talked, I have published 3 Arcadius books.
Mm-hmm.
I've written 4 screenplays.
Oh.
I wrote a murder mystery book, a collection of short stories, and I just published a graphic novel, which is loosely based on the first Arcadius book.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Oh, wow.
Well, go ahead, John. We got the next question queued up here.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was going to be our next question, George. So great setting that up for us. Could you tell us more about the thrillers and suspense and the graphic novel and the short story collection?
Sure. The short story collection, my previous laptop died and I thought I lost everything. I bought this one and I took it to a couple of people that couldn't fix it. Finally, a friend of mine was able to fix it. So I was searching through the files and I found tons of short stories I forgot about. The first collection is just about 7 short stories out of almost 24, and they're eclectic. One ranges from a signal comes up from the Bering Sea, and the Navy has to investigate, and what they find actually deals with all of realities. Another story is a psychologist has the ability to go into other people's minds and fix the problem. She has a 100% success rate. She doesn't tell anybody because she doesn't want to be experimented on, but her main thing was not to have sessions with kids because of their delicate psyche. Well, someone, a parole officer, talks into doing a teenager, and repercussions abound in the book because of it. And, a few others. I have 2 medical horrors that I've written based on what I used to do with tissue procurement, not organ, but tissue, and I explained the differences. And I don't do that chapter based. I did it different because the original book I wrote was 501 pages. And the editor said, look, George, I have a criminal justice degree. 90% of your police procedure is wrong. You're going to have to rewrite it. I was like, That was in 2009. No. So in 2015, I work at St. Vincent's in Indianapolis in the surgery department, and I told them about it. And they said, you need to rewrite it. So I had a brainstorming session, and someone said, well, just write it after he gets caught. Do it like a journal-based. There's no chapters, and you could tell his side of the story, and that's what I did.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's 2 of those. Go ahead and give those titles out.
The first one is Blind to Blood. The second one is Blind to Blood, The Endgame, which I picked before the Avengers came out. I just want you to know that.
And these are new since we've talked to you, it looks like, at least by the copyright dates. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot to add those. I've been busy.
No worries. Okay. So I saw another book that looked curious to me. I wanted to ask you more about Conversations with Karis, Oh Father. Looks to be well, I'll let you explain it a bit more, but being a dad, I wanted to find out a bit more about that.
Sure. Oh my God, that girl cracks me up. She's now 15, but from age 5 to 13, she said some of the funniest, yet some of the most profound things I've ever heard from a child. So I started writing them, posting them on Facebook, and I got a following. And by the time she was 13, they said, you need to take the funniest and most profound and create a book on it. So I compiled them and put it on a book. I mean, some of the stuff she came out with and still comes out with floors me. Like we were in the garage waiting for her bus, and she goes, after age 9, it became father, but it was daddy. And this one, she was like 6 or 7.
Sure.
She goes, Daddy, all my friends have dads that are in their 20s and 30s, and you're 50. You're old. I was like, yeah, I know, but how do you feel about that? She goes, it's okay, but you're going to die before the other daddies. I was like, oh, okay. She recognizes death.
Yeah.
So, and some of them are much more profound, like God reuses bodies because he runs out of them. Stuff like that out of an 8-year-old's mouth. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. John had asked earlier about the graphic novel. How was that process? Creating one of those?
Very, very interesting and eye-opening. I wrote the script, and then I went to a website called Fiverr and found an artist that was born and raised in China but moved to Turkey, and her artwork was really good but really expensive. And she goes, George, most comic books are 21, 22 pages. The script you sent me is going to be 40. It's going to be a lot more money. So I basically maxed out 2 credit cards to make this happen, because before Corona, I had like 55 orders, and after Corona, it went down to 20. So while I still have not made up my money, I am still proud of the work.
And is it based on the first book, or is it an original story? What is it exactly?
It's loosely based on the first book, because the more characters you have, in the graphic novel, the more expensive it became. So I had to switch up some of the scenes because of that. And it only deals with part of the book, not the whole book, else that would have been cost prohibitive.
Gotcha. And presumably, if this does turn out to be profitable, do you think you'll go on to do more of those?
Yes, because people have asked me for more. I need a wider berth of audience. My youngest brother, Patrick, is deaf, and he does not read well, but he's a very visual person. For 5 minutes, he told me how much he loved it. So.
Okay.
Well, that's great to hear. And it's encouraging for other authors who are looking to branch out into other formats for their work. But I'd like to acknowledge that you're a self-published author and you've been active for quite a while. What process did you use to build your brand, and how big a part did your personal appearances at conventions and book signings play, as well as social media?
Very interesting question. It has a few parts. I'll try and be brief. The book signings helped, but the first book signing I had at a comic book store, believe it or not, I was extremely shy. People would walk by and I wouldn't address them. And my wife goes, talk to them. And I refused. So I had an idea. At work, I work in the surgery department, and there's 30 ORs. So there's hundreds of people, plus they have 7 floors in the hospital. So I know the whole hospital. So as an experiment, I started saying hello to people that I did not know inside the surgery department and outside the surgery department. And it got me to the point where I was so comfortable I can address anybody. My marketing was interesting. I looked under odd and unusual ways to market your books. One of them was, you go to the dentist, you go to the doctor, ask them to put your books in there, and I've done that. Now my daughter, Karis, got a little overzealous because I always keep business cards on me, and we were at Walmart one time a couple years ago, and she goes, Father, give me some of your cards. I was like, sure. So a little while later, she comes back. I was like, the cards are gone. What'd you do? She goes, well, in books, fantasy books, in the book aisle, I just put your card in there. I was like, honey, you can't do that. You cannot do that. But it was an idea. It was very good.
Sure.
And she goes, there was Hoosiers call it purses. I call it pocketbook. A pocketbook was hanging. She just opened up the pocketbook and put my card in there and closed it. She put it in the back pocket of a pair of jeans that were hanging up. I was like, that's very inventive, honey, but you can't do that anymore.
That's funny, though.
Yeah.
So, I guess you've talked about some of the things you've done as a self-published author. Is there anything that you may be looking back on you may have done a bit differently? Something that didn't work out so well?
Well, there are lots of stories that I started and deleted earlier in my career that I wish I would have saved. Back in the day before a computer, I used to have one of those Rolex things with paper in it, and I'd write down short stories, and I don't know where that went to. I always regretted that. That's about it. But what was interesting is, and related to that, when I was writing book 8 of Arcadis, I was also writing book 2, Blind to Blood, which is a horror. I was writing them concurrently. I would write some in one book, write some in the other. And what fascinated me, besides the intellectual challenge of that, was after taking a step back, I realized that the 8th Arcadis book was much darker than I normally or typically do, because I usually like to insert humor. But because I was writing horror, a little of that bled into the Arcadis book.
Interesting. I could see how that could happen. Yeah.
I would, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because myself as an author, I work concurrently on sometimes up to 3 projects at once. And there is some overshadowing, some overlapping that occurs in the thought process or whatnot, but I do try and remain focused with regards to what particular work that I'm writing. So we have that in common. I'd like to ask you this next question as a follow-up, but I wanted to interject something that you'd said earlier with regards to Hoosiers calling women's totes purses as opposed to pocketbooks. And you're from New York, if I remember correctly, and based upon your accent, of course. That being said, it's funny that you mentioned that, because my great-grandmother's best friend, who was from Kentucky, and my great-grandmother herself called women's purses pocketbooks. So there are some people here in Hoosier land.
I was going to say
that do, but mostly older people. So it's funny that you had mentioned that, and I just thought I'd interject that with regards to being a Hoosier myself, that's not something that's unheard of here.
I was thinking pocketbooks also, but I just realized my mom comes from Connecticut, so that's probably why.
Well, I saw an episode of the Ellen DeGeneres show, and she said that on the West Coast they call it a handbag. The Midwest is a purse. On the East Coast, it's pocketbook. That's why I said that.
Yeah, it's interesting that it kind of is relative to the person, but I think that a lot of older people in the Midwest, or at least here in Indianapolis, they do say pocketbook. And it's funny that you had mentioned that, because I hadn't heard that phrase or that reference word for a while until you just brought it up. But I had heard it throughout my childhood, which is interesting.
May I address something that RJ said about Connecticut?
Yes, sir.
My grandmother was born in Connecticut, Danbury, in 1902, and she used to use a phrase that I never heard, nobody's ever heard of in New York or Indiana. Is called Enya. Don't know how to spell it. Enya just means yes. I grew up with my grandmother never saying yes, yeah, affirmative. It was always Enya. And out of the thousands and thousands of books I've read, I've only come across once.
I've never heard that. That's wild. It almost sounds almost Wisconsin-ish, doesn't it? Yeah. I'm not sure. No, I've never heard my mother use that word.
Yeah, I've never heard that word until just now. That's interesting. I know it's funny when you talk with people from different areas or whatnot, and they're not only is there a difference in their accent, but also in words that they use to describe things. So like here in Indiana, a lot of people refer to Coca-Cola and other soft drinks as pop, but in the South, it's soda, and sometimes everything, depending upon what it is a Coke. So if you go down to, let's just say, Alabama, which I've been down to Alabama before, they'll say, what flavor Coke do you want? And I'm like, what do you mean? I would like a Sprite. Oh, so you want lemon lime Coke? I'm like, it's not Coke, but okay. Yeah. And, it's just funny like that. And then, the syntax, it's just an amazing thing. And I know that when you and I first met, George, I picked up on your accent, and I was like, I knew you were from the East Coast somewhere, but I didn't know, because sometimes it, depending upon how people speak, you can confuse New York and New Jersey if you haven't heard a lot of people from those places to be able to pick out the nuances. And but you all have a certain drawl, which is amazing. And then a lot of people I've encountered from the East Coast that hear me speak say that I've got this accent or this twang to my voice, which I don't hear. Yes. And it's funny. I do know that sometimes I can slip into some Southern syntax with regards to how I say things. And I know that a lot of people from the Midwest have sampled culinary foods that are traditionally Southern. So I don't know if we're like a hodgepodge of communities coming together with regards to, since we're the Midwest, we're like between everything, you know, right in the center of everything. So we get a little hodgepodge of everything. But I do find that interesting. And then to go back onto topic, I'm sorry, but I thought that was kind of cool. I'm sure our readers will probably, or our listeners will probably get a kick out of it. What advice as an author would you give to someone starting out writing?
There was a friend that worked that no longer works there, and he kept saying, "Oh, I'm gonna write today. I'm gonna write today." And next time I seen him, I was like, "Did you write anything?" "No, I didn't get a chance." Next time I saw him, "Did you write anything?" "No." He goes, "What advice would you give me?" I was like, "Just write."
Yep,
Just write.
absolutely.
You could,
you know,
I'm sorry.
it's definitely a thing where the thought does not count.
You know, you write. Worry about what it says, how it's punctuated later. Just form the idea and put it down on paper. That's all I think.
Yep.
But you know, go ahead. I'm
Do
sorry.
you like the NaNoWriMo type things, or do you find those of any use? Or are you at a point now where the motivation's pretty much there?
Yes, I have never, ever suffered from writer's block. I get in the mood not to write, but if I sat down and wanted to write, I could do it. I just have so much stuff in my mind and I have the ability to actually write it down. So I've never had writer's block, or I don't use outlines. I just have ideas in my head.
Okay, so you're what they call a pantser kind of a writer?
I'm not familiar with that term.
So you got planners, who are people that outline meticulously. Pantsers, meaning you write seat of the pants, is where that expression comes from. And then planters are like in somewhere in between where you do a loose outline. So it sounds like you kind of write seat of the pants, you sit down and you just kind of roll with it.
Yes, and I like that way better because I tried an outline once and I deviated from it so much. For me, it was pointless.
That can happen.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I was
John.
going to say that I'm a pantser myself, so I definitely get, you know, I feel a kindred spirit with you with regards to that. I tried outlining earlier in my career, and I found that it was so infuriating because it was stagnating for me. I was trying to follow into something, and then my mind went somewhere else, and it was just, like you said, completely different. I'm like, why am I wasting my time outlining when I could get so much more writing done and be so much more productive? And it's funny that you had mentioned that, because I had just written a blog post that'll be coming up soon that's dealing with the whole pantser, planner, and plantser roles that are basically how we're classified.
References, yeah.
References of how we approach writing. It's interesting to hear that you had mentioned something before that about the old Plancer thing, and I cannot remember what it was that you said.
Well, for the record, I'm that third guy here. Of the three of us, we all have a different method. So I set up a really loose outline where I have room to kind of maneuver between the bullet points, as it were. And I try to make sure I generally stay on track, but I allow a lot of wiggle room, and I will follow those little trails as they come along. So yeah, between the three of us, we take the three major methods. So there you go, for whatever that's worth.
And book 9, guys, I did something I've never done before. I knew the ending, so I wrote the ending, and then I had to write the story to fit that ending.
Yeah,
I've done.
Yeah, I don't write linear. You know, sometimes I write scenes, and it's like how a film is shot. It's not in order. Sometimes it can be like the first filming session is for the middle of the movie, as opposed to the beginning. It's not always shot in sequence. So a lot of my writing is very cinematic, not just in what style I have, but also in how I approach the writing. And I do remember now what it was that you had mentioned before, which was the writer's block. And like yourself, when it comes to writer's block, I have experienced it, but it's fleeting because, like you said, I'll sit there and if I get blocked, it usually only lasts for maybe about a minute or so, because I'll just start typing something and then it kind of draws me back into the craft and the work. And that's how I explain how to overcome writer's block to people who ask about it, or people who I have conversations with, is to just write. Even if it's just gobbledygook, it could be anything, write a grocery list and then just start putting your characters' names in it. And then eventually, something will come of it, but a lot of authors don't believe that writer's block is a thing. I believe that it's a thing, but I think that it can be easily overcome. But as a professional writer, you learn to write at will for the most part, because you have to. If you're going to be successful in any way, you have to just be able to write. You can't just write when the mood hits you, because if that's the case, you'll never get anything completed. And that's how in my earlier years, in my 20s and early 30s, that's how I approached it. Well, I'm not in the mood for writing, so I never got anything done. And then eventually I said, you know what? I don't care. You're not leaving here until you've written something. So I would set a timer and I would just sit there. And if I had to write, gobbledygook, then that's what I did. But eventually I was able to train myself to write on demand. And I think that that's a very important thing for new writers to hear.
There's also another thing you could do, which I did just as an experiment with my creativity. I have 2 books of unconventional poetry, and one poem, I can't remember the exact one, but what I did was I had this thick dictionary and just blindly went to 10 different words, put it down on a piece of paper, and made a cohesive poem based on those 10 different words.
Interesting. It sounds like something a little more challenging than these folks I know. I'm thinking of Jess McHugh, who just came out with what's called blackout poetry. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
So basically, you take a book, you just you find keywords that you string together on the page, and you black everything else out, and that's basically how you create your poetic lines and such. So she's created a book of poetry from the novel Frankenstein, where she just went page by page and basically pulled out words that meant something to her, and then kind of strung them together, not as random as a dictionary, but kind of the same process, it sounds like.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I want to take this forward a bit and ask how you've been spending your time during this crazy COVID season here. Is it productive for you? Is it held you back some, or how you dealing with it, George?
In terms of writing, it has accelerated my writing because I have more time. In terms of book signings, I've not had any at all this year, which is not good for my finances. Excuse me. But next Saturday, there's a outdoor festival in Fortville, which is just northeast of me, and I signed up for that. I have a 10 by 10 bright yellow tent. You cannot miss me.
Okay. This is probably going out after that, but that's cool. I hadn't heard that any events were going on. So is that going to be your first one for a while then, right?
Yes. Well,
hopefully that'll go smooth for you. And So you said you are taking good advantage of the downtime. You're pretty much saying a lot of what I would be saying about this too. The lack of conventions and book signings is hurt pretty hard. What do you see going on? Obviously, none of us here are experts or scientists or anything, but how do you think this is going to affect conventions and book signings going forward? Do you think we'll just kind of slide back into the normal groove of things, or do you think things might change going forward? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think it will change for the next few years because, as I've read, the virus is mutating. So it's like the flu. I have to get a shot every year. It's mandatory. But they predict what strain it's going to be
Right.
for the flu. I think it's going to come down to that with the coronavirus. I think by next year, they'll have at least one vaccine. That's just my opinion. I don't have anything to base it on.
Sure. Well, hopefully we get something, because I very much miss the social aspects of the conventions. I miss hanging out with my writer friends like you. I only see you a couple times a year at events like, we missed In Conjunction and a couple things in Kentucky. And, I know John feels the same. I'm looking forward to being able to do that again. Yeah. So, that is pretty much all the questions we had. Is there anything that you really want to talk about that we didn't know about to ask, or anything about what you have coming up? You said you had the one event. Any specials, anything online that people can check out, or?
No, I see. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, especially with authors. I toil till my fingers bleed. I'm exaggerating, but I don't believe in giving books away for free, unless it's like when you go in and there's a door prize, somebody can win your book and then they can look at it. But to give your first book away so you can read the second, third, fourth, I don't know. I just work too hard writing to give my books away for free. Yeah, if you buy the first 4, I'll throw in something, maybe another book or something. But to just start off giving away books, I can't do it.
I gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. I had a free ebook, supposedly the start of my series. To be honest, it was, it was the first third of the first book. So it was sort of a special thing that's just sort of like the first few pages to kind of whet people's appetites. But, it is, there are a lot of people that swear by that practice. I have found that I haven't seen the sales that followed up to all those free giveaways. So you probably there's probably a little philosophy in there that makes some sense. You did work hard for it, and if people want to check it out, then they should be willing to pay a nominal price for it, a fair price. So that's about all the questions we have lined up. Why don't you tell our listeners how they can find you? Are you online, or I know you have an Amazon page. Why don't you put that information out there for them?
Okay, my Amazon page is www.georgekramer/author/amazon.com.
Okay.
Now, the comic book, the graphic novel, is not available on Amazon because they do not do print comic books. I had to go through an independent publisher. So if you want to email me and we could discuss the terms of that, it's georgekramerauthor@gmail.com.
Okay, and that's Kramer, Kramer, for those that are not looking at our tag card at this moment. But George Kramer, that's how you spell his last name.
Yep.
And that's all we have. John, you have anything else, or?
No, I did want to say that I do miss, fellowshipping with other authors, yourself included, George, absolutely. You've been a good friend to us, and I hope that we have reciprocated. I'm pleased and grateful that you were able to spend some time with us for this interview we're very grateful to have you back, and we look forward to getting this aired, and we look forward to what you have on the horizon coming up. Again, thank you for joining us for this interview today, and we look forward to seeing you sometime here in the future.
And another cool thing is when I checked in on you, because I hadn't in a couple of years, it was cool to see you had so many new releases out there, and we could give them a little talk about here as well. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate it, guys, and I really look forward to seeing you guys at hopefully upcoming events.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
So if you're wanting to reach out to me, my email address is johnfallenauthor@gmail.com, and you can check out my website, which is johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they find you, RJ?
The easiest thing is to go to your web browser and put in rjsullivanfiction.com all together. You go to there, and it's the stock RJ tab, and that gives you my email and my Twitter and all those other things. That's the easiest way to find me. So George, basically the easiest way I found to find George is to look up George Kramer on Amazon, look up Arcadis, and then from any of those entries you can click on his name, and that'll take you to the George Kramer author page on Amazon.
You could also Google author George Kramer. I'm on page 1, number 1 of Google.
There you go. All right.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I believe that's all we have today, and take it away, John.
All right. Well, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and as always, we do appreciate you. If you like this interview, please give us a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe so that you can catch all of our shows when they're aired and never miss one. And we hope to hear from you, so please be sure to comment on the videos and podcasts so that we can interact with you. We love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, until our next show, thank you for tuning in, and have a great day. Bye.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.